A mother dog got down on her knees and begged me to help her 5-day-old puppies. At first, I thought it was just a desperate animal clinging to survival. But what I found changed everything. Because these weren't just abandoned puppies. There was something hidden, something someone powerful didn't want me to see. And the closer I got to protecting them, the more dangerous it became. This wasn't just about saving tiny lives. It was about uncovering a truth that could burn everything down. So why would a helpless mother risk everything to trust a stranger? And what secret was so dangerous? Someone was willing to fight to keep it buried. I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. Thunder rumbled across the dark sky as Greer Landon pushed open the heavy service door of the Highway Lantern Motel. The night shift had been particularly long, filled with clogged toilets and flickering hallway lights that needed fixing. He tugged his worn work jacket tighter around his shoulders, seeking a moment of peace in the cool night air. Rain pelted the cracked pavement of the parking lot, creating shallow puddles that reflected the motel's neon sign. The familiar smell of wet asphalt and ozone filled his nostrils as he leaned against the rough brick wall, watching sheets of rain dance in the yellow security lights. A movement in the shadows caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just the wind pushing around some debris, but then a large shape emerged from the darkness. A German Shepherd, completely soaked, her fur matted against her powerful frame, stepped into the light. Despite her size, there was something desperate in the way she moved, something that made Greer's heart skip a beat. The dog stopped about 10 feet away from him, her amber eyes locked onto his face. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered herself to the wet ground. Her eyes, intelligent, pleading, never left his. There was an urgency in her gaze that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "Hey there," Greer said softly, keeping his voice gentle and steady. "You okay, girl?" The shepherd's ears perked up at his voice, and she took a few steps toward him before turning back to look over her shoulder. She whined, a high-pitched sound that carried even over the drumming rain. Then, without warning, she darted away into the darkness. Something pulled at Greer's chest, an instinct he couldn't explain. Before he could think twice about it, he was following her, his work boots splashing through puddles as he ran. The dog would stop every few yards, making sure he was still behind her, then continue on her desperate journey. She led him past the dumpsters, beyond the old playground equipment that hadn't seen use in years, to a rusted metal shed that sat forgotten at the edge of the property. The door hung crooked on its hinges, creaking in the wind. The German Shepherd disappeared inside. Greer hesitated for just a moment before ducking through the entrance. The beam from his phone's flashlight cut through the musty darkness, revealing shelves of abandoned cleaning supplies and broken equipment. The dog stood in the corner, and as he moved closer, he heard it, tiny whimpers coming from beneath a pile of old insulation. "Oh my God," he breathed, dropping to his knees beside the German Shepherd. There, huddled together on the damp pink fiberglass, were 5 tiny puppies. They couldn't have been more than 5 days old, their eyes still sealed shut, their little bodies trembling from the cold and wet. The mother dog nudged his hand with her nose, her eyes seeming to say, "Please help us." Without hesitation, Greer shrugged off his work shirt, leaving him in just his t-shirt. His hands shook slightly as he carefully gathered the puppies, wrapping them in the warm fabric of his flannel shirt. Each one was so small they fit in the palm of his hand, their tiny bodies cold to the touch. "It's okay," he murmured, as much to himself as to the mother dog. "We're gonna get them somewhere safe." His ancient pickup truck sat in the employee parking area, and he ran to it as fast as he dared with his precious cargo. The German Shepherd followed close at his heels, never taking her eyes off her puppies. The truck's door creaked as he pulled it open, and he carefully placed the bundle of puppies on the passenger seat. The mother dog didn't wait for an invitation. She leaped into the cab and curled herself around her babies, her body still trembling from exhaustion and cold. Greer cranked the heat as high as it would go, his mind already racing through options. The nearest regular vet would be closed at this hour, but he knew there was an emergency animal clinic about 20 minutes away in the next town. The truck's engine roared to life, and Greer pulled out of the parking lot, his windshield wipers fighting against the downpour. Every few seconds, he glanced over at his passengers. The mother dog had her head resting on top of her puppies, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, but still alert, watching every move he made. "You did good, girl," he said softly, reaching over to pat her head. She allowed the touch, even leaning into it slightly. "You found help. We're gonna make sure your babies are okay." The rain grew heavier as they drove, turning the world outside into a blur of streetlights and shadowy shapes. Greer's knuckles were white on the steering wheel as he navigated the slick roads, hyper-aware of every bump and turn that might disturb his fragile passengers. He couldn't help but wonder about this dog's story. She was too well-bred to be a stray, and despite her current state, he could see she'd once been well cared for. There was something about the way she carried herself, a kind of dignity that spoke of training and purpose. A thin scar ran along her flank, visible even through her wet fur, hinting at some past adventure or trauma. The puppies stirred occasionally, their tiny squeaks barely audible over the rumble of the engine and the drumming rain. Each sound made their mother's ears twitch, her protective instinct never wavering despite her obvious exhaustion. Lightning flashed across the sky, followed by a crash of thunder that made the truck seem to shudder. The German Shepherd remained calm, though, as if she knew they were heading toward safety. Her trust in him, this stranger she'd sought out in her moment of desperate need, touched something deep in Greer's heart. He'd always been the guy people overlooked, the maintenance man who fixed their problems and then faded into the background. But this magnificent animal had seen something in him, had chosen him to help save her puppies. For the first time in a long while, he felt like maybe he was meant for something more than just fixing leaky faucets and changing light bulbs. The emergency animal clinic sign appeared through the rain, its red cross glowing like a beacon in the night. Greer pulled into the parking lot, his truck splashing through deep puddles. Before he could even put it in park, the mother dog was sitting up, alert and ready. "We're here," he said softly, reaching over to check on the puppies. They were still bundled in his shirt, their tiny bodies warmer now thanks to their mother's presence and the truck's heater. "Let's get your babies checked out." As he gathered the precious bundle in his arms, the German Shepherd stayed close, her body pressing against his legs as they hurried through the rain toward the clinic's entrance. Something told him this was just the beginning of a much bigger story, but for now, all that mattered was getting these innocent lives to safety. Looking down at the mother dog's determined face, Greer couldn't help but feel that his life had somehow shifted on its axis. In choosing to follow her into the storm, he'd stepped onto a path that would lead him places he never expected to go, but seeing the trust in those amber eyes, he knew he'd made the right choice. The clinic's automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, welcoming them into the brightly lit waiting room. The German Shepherd shook herself, sending droplets of water flying, but never moved more than a few inches from Greer's side. Together, they approached the front desk, ready to begin whatever adventure lay ahead of them. The fluorescent lights of the emergency veterinary clinic cast harsh shadows across the worn linoleum floor as Greer paced anxiously in the sterile hallway. His work boots, still wet from the rain, squeaked with each step. The German Shepherd mother and her 5 puppies were being examined in the treatment room, and every minute that passed felt like an hour. Finally, the door swung open, and Dr. Tamsin Cuellar emerged, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing blue scrubs with tiny paw prints on them. Her expression was a mix of concern and determination as she gestured for Greer to follow her into the exam room. "The good news is, they're all alive," she said, leading him to where the puppies lay in a heated incubator, their tiny bodies huddled together for warmth. The mother dog watched attentively from a nearby examination table, her amber eyes never leaving her babies. "But they're going to need round-the-clock care. They're severely dehydrated, and their body temperatures were dangerously low." Greer's throat tightened as he looked at the tiny creatures. "Will they make it?" "With proper care, yes, but it's going to take dedication." "Doctor," Cuellar's steady gaze met his. "I've started them on subcutaneous fluids and warming therapy." The mother. "Let's check if she has a microchip, shall we?" She pulled out a handheld scanner, running it over the German Shepherd's neck and shoulders. A sharp beep made them both jump. The dog's ears twitched, but she remained calm, seeming to trust them despite her obvious exhaustion. "Doctor." Cuellar's face darkened as she read the information on the scanner's display. "Well, this explains a few things," she muttered, her jaw tightening. "She's registered to Stonegate Security K9. Greer frowned, not recognizing the name. "What's that?" A private breeding facility about 50 miles from here. They're known for their security and military dog contracts. Dr. Cuellar's voice carried an edge of contempt. They have a reputation in veterinary circles, and not a good one. They push their breeding females too hard, too often. The German Shepherd's tail drooped slightly, as if she understood they were talking about her past. Greer moved closer to her, placing a gentle hand on her damp fur. She leaned into his touch, seeking comfort. Her name's Hera, Dr. Cuellar continued, reading from the scanner. She's 6 years old, and... She paused, her eyes widening. She was a FEMA, certified search and rescue dog before Stonegate acquired her. This isn't just any dog, Mr. Landon. She's highly trained, or was, before they turned her into a breeding machine. Greer felt sick to his stomach. So what happens now? Legally, she belongs to them. Dr. Cuellar's voice was tight with frustration. If they find out she's here, they'll claim her, and the puppies too. Their breeding contracts are ironclad. They've sued smaller clinics into bankruptcy for interfering with their property. The word property made Greer's blood boil. He looked at Hera, saw the intelligence and dignity in her eyes, the gentle way she watched over her puppies despite her own exhaustion. They're not getting her back, he said firmly, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. Dr. Cuellar studied him for a long moment, her professional demeanor softening slightly. Mr. Landon, you need to understand what you're saying. Stonegate has deep pockets and aggressive lawyers. They won't just let this go. I don't care, Greer replied, his hand still resting on Hera's head. Look at her. Look what they did to her. She came to me for help. She chose to trust me. I'm not letting her down. A hint of a smile touched Dr. Cuellar's lips. Well then, we better make sure these little ones survive to give Stonegate a proper fight. She moved to the incubator, checking the temperature gauge. They'll need feeding every 2 hours, day and night. The mother's milk production is compromised from stress and malnutrition, so we'll need to supplement with formula. She demonstrated how to prepare the special formula and proper feeding techniques, showing Greer how to hold each tiny puppy so they wouldn't choke. Hera watched intently, her tail wagging slightly when each puppy successfully took the bottle. They'll need to stay here for at least 24 hours, Dr. Cuellar explained, making notes in their charts. After that, if they're stable enough, you can take them home. But you'll need proper supplies, heating pads, feeding bottles, puppy formula, and a secure, quiet space where they can't be disturbed. As they talked, a shadow passed by the frosted glass window of the exam room door. Dr. Cuellar's posture stiffened, and she quickly moved to block the window's view of Hera and the puppies. We need to be careful, she whispered. Word travels fast in the veterinary community. The longer we can keep their presence here quiet, the better. Greer nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. He watched as Hera gently nosed each of her puppies, counting them as if making sure they were all still there. Their tiny bodies squirmed and squeaked, fighting for life despite the odds stacked against them. I'll need to document everything, Dr. Cuellar said, pulling out her phone and taking pictures of Hera's condition. The scarring on her flanks, the signs of overbreeding, her current state of malnutrition. It could all be important later. She paused, meeting Greer's eyes. Are you sure you want to do this? Once we start down this path, there's no turning back. Greer thought about his simple life at the Highway Lantern Motel, fixing leaky faucets and changing light bulbs. He'd always been the kind of person who faded into the background, who never made waves. But looking at Hera and her puppies, he knew with absolute certainty that sometimes doing the right thing meant stepping into the spotlight, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. I'm sure, he said quietly. What do we do next? Dr. Cuellar began gathering supplies, syringes for the subcutaneous fluids, fresh towels, and more formula. First, we get them through the night. Then we start planning how to keep them safe. I have some contacts, people who've dealt with Stonegate before. We're going to need all the help we can get. The night stretched ahead of them, filled with regular feedings, temperature checks, and careful monitoring. Each tiny life was precious, each hour critical. As Greer settled into a chair beside the incubator, Hera rested her head on his knee, her eyes full of trust. He realized that sometimes the biggest challenges in life come disguised as simple acts of kindness, like following a desperate mother dog into the rain. In the sterile clinic hallways, shadows continued to move past the door, each one a potential threat. But inside the exam room, a small family had formed: a maintenance man, a veterinarian, a former search and rescue dog, and 5 tiny puppies fighting for survival. The real battle was just beginning, but for now, they focused on getting through one feeding at a time, 1 hour at a time, while the rain continued to fall outside in the darkness. The first rays of dawn painted the veterinary clinic's windows in soft pink and gold, but the peaceful morning atmosphere shattered as heavy footsteps echoed through the waiting room. Greer Landon, who had been dozing in an uncomfortable plastic chair while keeping watch over Hera and her puppies, jerked awake at the sound of voices. Through the glass doors strode a heavyset man in his late 40s, wearing an expensive polo shirt with a Stonegate Security K9 logo emblazoned on the chest. His thick fingers glittered with gold rings, and his face wore an expression of barely contained anger. Behind him, a uniformed deputy sheriff followed, his badge catching the early morning light. Greer's heart began to pound. He positioned himself between the newcomers and the door to the treatment room where Hera and her puppies rested. The mother dog had only just settled down after hours of anxiety, carefully nursing her vulnerable little ones. "I'm Royce Madden," the man announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to getting his way. He held up a stack of papers. "I own Stonegate Security K9, and I'm here to collect my property." The word property made Greer's jaw clench. He stood straighter, though his work coveralls were still damp and wrinkled from the night's rain. "The puppies need constant care right now. They're not going anywhere." Madden's face reddened. "That's my breeding stock you've got in there. Grade, a German Shepherd, worth thousands. You had no right to interfere." "Breeding stock?" Greer's voice rose with disbelief. She was desperate for help. Those puppies were freezing to death in a rusty shed. The deputy stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his belt. "Sir, Mr. Madden has proper documentation of ownership. The dog's microchip confirms it. The microchip shows Hera belongs to Stonegate." Greer acknowledged, his hands trembling slightly, but his voice steady. "But where's the paperwork for the puppies? Where's proof they're yours?" Madden waved the papers in his face. "The mother is mine, therefore the litter is mine. Simple as that. Now step aside before I have the deputy here arrest you for theft." Dr. Tamsin Cuellar emerged from her office, drawn by the commotion. Her presence gave Greer a boost of confidence. She had been caring for the dogs all night, monitoring their condition with genuine concern. "Those puppies are barely 5 days old," Greer pressed on. "They need special care. They were abandoned in dangerous conditions." "I don't need some maintenance man telling me how to handle my kennels," Madden sneered, looking Greer up and down with contempt. "You're nothing but a meddler who stuck his nose where it doesn't belong." The deputy shifted uncomfortably, but maintained his professional demeanor. "Sir, we can do this the easy way, or the hard way. The law's pretty clear about property rights." Greer felt his throat tighten. He looked through the window of the treatment room, where Hera lay curled protectively around her puppies. Her amber eyes met his, and he saw the same pleading look she'd given him in the storm. Something inside him hardened with resolve. "No," he said firmly. "I'm not moving. Those puppies nearly died last night. If you're such a responsible owner, where were you when your breeding stock was desperately trying to save her babies?" Madden's face darkened with rage. "Listen here, you little nobody. I've got contracts with law enforcement agencies across 3 states. I've got friends in high places. You really want to make an enemy of me over some mutts?" "They're not mutts," Greer shot back. "Hera's a trained search and rescue dog. What happened to her? How did she end up pregnant and abandoned?" The question seemed to strike a nerve. Madden's confident facade cracked slightly before he recovered. "That's none of your business. Deputy, I want this man removed and my dogs returned immediately." Dr. Cuellar stepped forward, her medical authority adding weight to the situation. "As the attending veterinarian, I have concerns about moving these animals right now. The puppies are still in a delicate state. I'll have my own vet look at them." Madden dismissed her with a wave. "They're my property, and I'm taking them now." Greer planted his feet more firmly. His heart was racing, but he'd never felt more certain about anything in his life. "Show me documentation, proving those puppies are legally yours. Show me breeding records." Show me proper kennel licenses. Show me why a search and rescue dog ended up in a rusty shed instead of a proper whelping box. The deputy looked uncertainly between Madden and Greer. Mr. Madden, do you have those additional documents? Madden's face flushed darker. I don't need to prove anything to this maintenance man. The mother's chip is registered to me. That's all that matters. Then I'm not moving, Greer stated simply. And if you try to take them by force, I'll file charges for animal endangerment. I have pictures of where I found them. I have Dr. Cuellar's medical report showing their condition. How do you think that will look for your kennel's reputation? The threat of public exposure seemed to give Madden pause. His eyes narrowed as he reassessed the situation. The deputy's hand had dropped away from his belt, his earlier certainty wavering in the face of the questions raised. You're making a big mistake, Madden growled. This isn't over. I'll be back with more than just ownership papers. You'll regret getting in my way. He jabbed a finger at Greer's chest. Nobody crosses Royce Madden without consequences. Greer didn't flinch. And nobody's going to hurt these dogs while I'm around. Not anymore. Madden spun on his heel and stormed out, the automatic doors whooshing shut behind him. The deputy lingered for a moment, looking troubled. Be careful, he warned Greer quietly. Madden's got influence in this county. He wasn't bluffing about his connections. After they left, Greer's legs felt weak with relief and leftover adrenaline. He slumped against the wall, running a shaky hand through his hair. Dr. Cuellar touched his arm supportively. That was brave, she said. But he'll be back, and next time he'll come prepared. Greer nodded, watching through the treatment room window as Hera lifted her head to look at him. Her puppies squirmed against her belly, tiny and vulnerable, completely unaware of the storm brewing around them. In just a few hours, his simple life had become infinitely more complicated, but looking at those innocent lives, he knew he couldn't have chosen differently. We'll figure something out, he said softly. They're not going back to that place, whatever it takes. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows through the clinic windows. Greer knew he should be exhausted after being up all night, but his mind was racing with plans and possibilities. He had drawn a line in the sand against a powerful man, and now he would have to find the strength to stand his ground. For Hera, for her puppies, for what was right. After Madden's threatening departure, Dr. Tamsin Cuellar couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. She sat at her computer in the clinic's small office, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she dug deeper into Stonegate's history. The morning sun streamed through the blinds, casting thin stripes of light across her determined face. This can't be right, she muttered, leaning closer to the screen. Greer, who had been dozing in a chair nearby, stirred at the sound of her voice. What did you find? He asked, rubbing his tired eyes. Tamsin's face was grim as she turned to face him. In the past 3 years, Stonegate has received 12 citations for improper kennel conditions. There are multiple complaints about dogs going missing from their facility, supposedly escaped or died, but with no documentation. And get this, their breeding license was actually suspended for 6 months last year. Greer moved to stand behind her chair, scanning the records displayed on the screen. How are they still operating? Money talks, Tamsin said bitterly. They have contracts with police departments and security firms. Every time there's an investigation, it gets quietly resolved. She clicked through more pages, her frown deepening. But that's not even the worst part. I decided to trace Hera's chip history all the way back, and she paused, taking a deep breath. She had a previous owner before Stonegate, a woman named Mariella Kovac. Something in Tamsin's tone made Greer's heart beat faster. What happened? Mariella reported Hera stolen 2 years ago. She was a widow who worked with FEMA as a search and rescue handler. Hera wasn't just any dog, she was Federal Emergency Management Agency certified. A professional search and rescue dog with multiple successful missions under her belt. Greer sank into the chair next to Tamsin, trying to process this information. You mean she saved people's lives? Tamsin nodded, pulling up more records. According to this, Hera was involved in at least 7 successful rescue operations. Building collapses, natural disasters. She helped find survivors in situations where human rescuers couldn't reach them. She was considered one of the best in the program. The weight of this revelation settled heavily on Greer's shoulders. He thought about Hera's intelligent eyes, the way she had sought him out and led him to her puppies. It made sense now. She wasn't just acting on instinct, she was drawing on years of training and experience. There's more, Tamsin continued, her voice tight with anger. Mariella filed multiple complaints after Hera disappeared. She suspected Stonegate was involved because they had tried to buy Hera from her several times, offering huge amounts of money. She refused, said Hera was family, not merchandise. Then one day, Hera vanished from her fenced yard while Mariella was at the grocery store. And somehow she ended up at Stonegate, Greer finished, his jaw clenching. They stole a search and rescue dog to use as a breeder. Tamsin pulled up Mariella's contact information. She never stopped looking. There are posts on missing pet forums dated just a few months ago. She's still searching for Hera. Greer stood up abruptly, pacing the small office. We have to contact her. She needs to know Hera's alive. Already on it, Tamsin said, reaching for the phone. She paused with her hand on the receiver. But Greer, this changes everything. If what we suspect is true, if Stonegate really did steal Hera, we're not just dealing with animal neglect anymore. This is organized theft, fraud, maybe even interstate crime if they're selling puppies from stolen dogs. Greer stopped pacing, looking through the office window to where Hera lay with her puppies in the treatment room. The proud German Shepherd was more than just a mother protecting her babies. She was a highly trained professional, a hero who had saved human lives, stolen from someone who loved her and forced into breeding. No wonder Madden was so threatening, he said quietly. He's not just trying to protect his property, he's trying to cover up his crimes. Tamsin dialed Mariella's number, her hand slightly shaking. It's ringing, she whispered. After several tense moments, a woman's voice answered. Hello, Mrs. Kovac? This is Dr. Tamsin Quayer from Emergency Veterinary Care in Cedar Grove. I'm calling about your dog, Hera. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Hera, you found her. Is she okay? She's here at our clinic, Tamsin said gently. She's alive, and she's safe, but there's a lot we need to tell you. What followed was an emotional conversation, as Tamsin explained the situation. Mariella's voice cracked several times as she listened to the story of how Greer had found Hera and her puppies. When Tamsin mentioned Stonegate's involvement, Mariella's tone changed from emotional to angry. I knew it, she said fiercely. I knew they had taken her, but every time I tried to investigate, I hit walls. They threatened to sue me for defamation if I kept making accusations. Mrs. Kovac, Greer spoke up, leaning closer to the speakerphone. I promise you, we won't let them take Hera back, but we need your help. We need proof that she's yours, documentation of her training and certification. I have everything, Mariella replied immediately. All her FEMA certifications, her mission records, photos and videos of us working together. I never got rid of anything. I couldn't. I can be there in 3 hours. Please, just keep her safe until I arrive. After ending the call, Greer and Tamsin sat in stunned silence for a moment. The morning sun had climbed higher, and they could hear the normal sounds of the clinic coming to life as other staff arrived for the day shift. We need to document everything, Tamsin said finally, standing up. Take detailed photos of Hera and the puppies. Get statements from everyone who was here last night. Once Mariella arrives with her documentation, we'll have enough evidence to go to the authorities, real authorities, not just local law enforcement, that Madden might have influence over. Greer nodded, but his expression was worried. What about until then? Madden said he'd be back. I've already talked to my staff. Nobody goes in or out of that treatment room without my direct approval. We'll set up a cot in there so someone can stay with them around the clock. She placed a hand on Greer's shoulder. You should go home, get some real sleep. You've been up all night. But Greer shook his head. I'm not leaving them, not until I know they're safe. Tamsin studied him for a moment, seeing the determination in his tired eyes. This quiet maintenance man had stumbled into something much bigger than himself, yet he showed no signs of backing down. In fact, learning the truth about Hera seemed to have only strengthened his resolve. Then let's get to work, she said, gathering her files. We have 3 hours to prepare for Mariella's arrival, and I want everything ready. Madden and Stonegate have gotten away with this for too long. It's time someone stood up to them. Together, They walked back to the treatment room. Hera lifted her head as they entered, her amber eyes seeming to hold a deeper wisdom now that they knew her history. One of her puppies squeaked softly, and she gently nosed it closer to her warm body. Greer knelt beside her, gently stroking her head. "Don't worry, girl," he murmured. "We know who you really are now, and we're going to make sure you get back where you belong." The German Shepherd's tail thumped softly against the blankets, as if she understood. Perhaps she did. This was a dog who had braved collapsing buildings and natural disasters to save lives. She had faced dangers most humans couldn't imagine, only to be stolen from her beloved handler and forced into a life of breeding. But now, thanks to one man's compassion and one veterinarian's determination to uncover the truth, her story was finally coming to light. The fight ahead would not be easy. Stonegate had money, influence, and a vested interest in keeping their crimes hidden. But as Greer watched Hera tenderly caring for her puppies, he knew with absolute certainty that this was a battle worth fighting. This wasn't just about 5 tiny puppies anymore. It was about justice for a stolen hero, about exposing corruption, and about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. As the morning sun filled the treatment room with warm light, Greer and Tamsin began their preparations, knowing that the real challenge was just beginning. Greer's garage looked nothing like its usual cluttered self. He had spent hours clearing space, pushing his tools and storage boxes against the walls to make room for what mattered most now: Hera and her 5 tiny puppies. The winter air seeped through the gaps in the old garage door, but he'd thought of that too. A space heater hummed steadily in the corner, keeping the makeshift nursery warm. "Easy now," he murmured, watching Hera settle into the large cardboard box he'd padded with old blankets and towels. She looked up at him with those intelligent amber eyes, seeming to understand that this strange man was trying his best to help. The puppies, still so small they could fit in his palm, squirmed and squeaked as they sought their mother's warmth. Tamsin stood beside him, her arms full of supplies from the clinic: formula, bottles, heating pads, and more items Greer hadn't even known existed for puppy care. "You'll need to supplement their feeding," she explained, setting everything down on his workbench. "Hera's been through too much stress. She might not produce enough milk for all 5. Greer nodded, trying to hide his nervousness. He'd never bottle-fed anything in his life, let alone something so fragile. "Show me how." Tamsin's usual businesslike manner softened as she demonstrated the proper technique. "Hold them like this," she said, cradling the smallest puppy against her chest. "Temperature of the formula needs to be just right. Test it on your wrist like you would for a human baby." She guided his hands as he prepared the tiny bottle, showing him how to check the flow of milk. The next hour passed in a blur of careful feeding attempts. Greer's hands shook at first, but gradually steadied as he gained confidence. Each puppy had its own personality already. The biggest one gulped greedily, while the runt needed extra coaxing. Hera watched everything with alert attention, occasionally nosing closer to check on her babies. "You're doing great," Tamsin assured him, packing up her medical bag. "I'll come back tonight to check on them. Remember, every 2 hours, around the clock. Set your alarm." Just as Tamsin was leaving, a car pulled up outside. Through the garage's dusty windows, Greer saw a woman step out, silver-streaked hair in a neat braid, wearing a faded search and rescue jacket that had clearly seen years of use. Before anyone could speak, Hera's reaction told them everything they needed to know. The German Shepherd's entire body quivered with recognition. She rose from her nest, careful not to disturb the sleeping puppies, and let out a soft whine that broke Greer's heart. When Mariella Kovacs stepped into the garage, Hera bounded to her with such joy that tears sprang to Greer's eyes. "Oh, my girl," Mariella whispered, dropping to her knees to embrace the dog. "My brave, beautiful girl." Her voice cracked with emotion as Hera covered her face with frantic kisses, tail wagging so hard her whole body shook. "I never stopped looking for you." Tamsin stayed, her departure forgotten as they all watched this reunion. Hera kept pressing against Mariella, as if trying to make up for every moment of lost time. After several minutes, the dog remembered her puppies and led Mariella to the nest, proudly showing off her little family. "She was the best search and rescue dog I ever trained," Mariella said quietly, settling cross-legged on the concrete floor. Hera immediately laid her head in her former handler's lap, sighing contentedly as Mariella stroked her ears. We worked together for 6 years. After my husband passed, he was a firefighter. Hera was all I had left. Greer pulled up some old lawn chairs, and they all sat as Mariella shared the full story. It started with offers to buy her. Legitimate at first, other SAR teams, police departments. But I couldn't sell her. She wasn't just a working dog, she was family. Her fingers tightened in Hera's fur. Then Stonegate showed up. They said they'd pay anything, that they needed her genetics for their breeding program. When I refused, the threats started. What kind of threats? Tamsin asked, her professional demeanor sharpening with interest. Phone calls at first, warning me that I was making a mistake, that they'd get her one way or another. Mariella's voice hardened. Then someone broke into my garage, left a note saying I should take the money while I could. I installed security cameras, but she swallowed hard. They were smarter than that. Waited until we were on a training exercise in the mountains. 1 minute, she was running a search pattern. The next, gone. Just vanished into the trees. Greer felt sick. He looked at Hera, imagining her being torn away from someone she loved and trusted so completely. How long ago? 18 months, Mariella answered. I filed police reports, hired a private investigator, but Stonegate covered their tracks well. The investigator found hints, records of them acquiring new breeding stock around the same time, but nothing concrete enough to prove anything. Hera nudged her puppies closer to Mariella, clearly wanting her old friend to meet her new family. The woman's hands were gentle as she checked each tiny puppy, her experienced eyes assessing their health. She was always so gentle, Mariella said softly. Even in her work, finding survivors in collapsed buildings, she knew exactly how to move carefully around injured people. She saved my life, Greer admitted, telling them about that stormy night, how Hera had sought him out specifically. She knew exactly what she was doing, didn't she? Finding someone who would help. Mariella nodded, pride shining in her eyes. That's her training. She's always been able to read people, know who she can trust. Even after everything they did to her, she didn't lose that ability to connect. Tamsin spoke up, her voice determined. We need to document everything. Your original police reports, the threats, any evidence you still have. Combined with what we've found about Stonegate's operations, it might be enough to build a case. They won't give up easily, Mariella warned. Royce Madden has friends in high places. And breeding dogs like Hera, dogs with proven working bloodlines, it's big money. Greer watched Hera, now contentedly nursing her puppies while staying pressed against Mariella's leg. The sight filled him with a fierce protectiveness he'd never felt before. I don't care who their friends are, he said quietly. They're not getting her back. Or these puppies. The weight of responsibility settled deeper into his bones. This wasn't just about saving some abandoned puppies anymore. It was about righting a terrible wrong, about protecting a bond that should never have been broken. Looking at Hera's trust in both him and Mariella, he knew he'd fight whatever battles came their way. We should set up a schedule, Tamsin suggested practically. Between the three of us, we can make sure someone's always here with them. Mariella, your experience with Hera will be invaluable, and I can monitor the puppy's health. She glanced at Greer. And you've already proven you're a quick study with bottle feeding. They spent the next hour working out logistics. Greer would take the night shift since he was used to being up at odd hours anyway. Mariella would come during the day, making up for lost time with Hera while helping care for the puppies. Tamsin would check in morning and evening, ensuring everyone was healthy and thriving. As they talked, Greer noticed how Hera kept looking between him and Mariella, as if making sure both her protectors were still there. She seemed more relaxed than he'd seen her yet, finally able to fully focus on her puppies now that her beloved handler was back in her life. Thank you, Mariella said suddenly, turning to Greer, for believing in her, for giving her a safe place when she needed it most. Greer felt his throat tighten with emotion. She's the one who believed in me, he admitted. I'm just trying to be worthy of that trust. The afternoon light slanted through the garage windows, casting long shadows. In their makeshift nest, Hera's puppies slept peacefully, unaware of the complex human emotions swirling around them. Their mother kept watch, her head held high with a dignity that no amount of mistreatment had managed to break. Looking at this unlikely family, a retired SAR handler, a night maintenance worker, a determined vet, and a brave dog who had brought them all together. Greer felt something shift in his heart. They were in this together, now, bound by love and loyalty to a dog who had never lost faith in human kindness, even when humans had failed her so badly. The space heater hummed steadily, keeping the winter chill at bay. Outside, the world with all its threats and challenges waited. But in here, in this transformed garage that had become a sanctuary, hope bloomed as steady and strong as Hera's unwavering spirit. The evening descended like a heavy curtain over Greer's neighborhood, bringing with it an unsettling quiet. Inside his garage, Greer had just finished the last feeding of the puppies, watching as they squirmed back to their makeshift bed where Hera waited. The mother dog's amber eyes caught the dim light as she curled protectively around her babies. Greer checked his watch. 9:30 in the evening. He'd installed a few battery-powered camping lanterns around the garage for extra light, their soft glow creating warm pools of illumination. The puppies were growing stronger each day, their tiny bodies filling out, their eyes beginning to open to the world around them. "Good girl, Hera," he murmured, reaching down to scratch behind her ears. She leaned into his touch, but her ears suddenly pricked forward. A low growl rumbled in her chest. The lights flickered once, twice, then plunged the garage into darkness. Greer's heart jumped into his throat. The camping lanterns cast eerie shadows as he moved quickly to the electrical panel. The main switch was still in the on position, but when he tried the garage door opener, nothing happened. Outside, he heard the crunch of footsteps on gravel. Hera's growl deepened into a warning bark that echoed off the garage walls. The puppies, disturbed by their mother's agitation, began to whimper. "Easy girl," Greer whispered, though his own pulse was racing. He grabbed the first weapon he could find, a heavy tire iron from his toolbox. The metal was cold and solid in his hands. A scratching sound came from the side door, followed by the distinct noise of someone trying to force the lock. Hera exploded into action, her thunderous barks filling the confined space with a wall of sound. The door shuddered in its frame as someone threw their weight against it. Greer positioned himself between the entrance and the puppies, tire iron raised. "I've called the police," he shouted, though he hadn't had the chance. "Back off." The response was a splintering crack as the door frame began to give way. Moonlight spilled through the widening gap, and Greer caught glimpses of dark figures, at least 3 men. The door burst inward with a crash. Hera launched herself at the first intruder, her teeth finding purchase in a thick jacket sleeve. The man yelled and stumbled backward, but 2 more pushed past him. Greer swung the tire iron in a wide arc, connecting with something solid. Someone cursed. "Get the pups," a gruff voice ordered, a voice Greer didn't recognize, but the intent was clear enough. The garage erupted into chaos. Hera was a fury of snarls and snapping teeth, keeping 2 men at bay while Greer grappled with the third. The camping lanterns toppled in the struggle, shadows dancing wildly across the walls. A fist caught Greer in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs, but he managed to bring the tire iron down on his attacker's shoulder. The puppies were screaming now, their high-pitched cries mixing with the sounds of combat. Greer heard the scrape of the cardboard box, being dragged across concrete. "No," he shouted, trying to fight his way toward the sound. Something hard struck him across the back, sending him to his knees. Through watering eyes, he saw a dark figure clutching something small and squirming. Hera's attention snapped to her stolen pup. She abandoned her current target and charged toward the man holding her baby, but another attacker grabbed her by the collar, yanking her back with brutal force. "Run," someone yelled. The figures retreated through the broken door, taking advantage of Hera's momentary restraint. By the time she broke free, they were already sprinting into the darkness. Hera's bark changed from aggressive to desperate as she bolted after them. Greer stumbled to his feet, ignoring the pain in his back and ribs, and followed. But the night had swallowed the intruders. The sound of a car engine roaring to life came from around the corner, followed by squealing tires. "No, no, no," Greer gasped, watching helplessly as red taillights disappeared down the street. Hera ran to the end of the driveway, her barks transforming into mournful howls that split the night air. Back in the garage, 4 frightened puppies huddled together in their box, but the 5th, the smallest female with the white splash on her chest, was gone. Greer's hands shook as he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Hera paced frantically between the garage and the driveway, her nose to the ground, then lifting to release heart-wrenching whines. Every few steps, she would return to the remaining puppies, counting them with gentle nose touches, before resuming her desperate search. The police arrived 15 minutes later, their red and blue lights painting the neighborhood in alternating colors. Greer gave his statement, described the attack, but he knew in his gut who was behind it. Royce Madden had escalated beyond threats and intimidation. He'd drawn first blood. As the officers documented the scene, Hera's distress only grew. She wouldn't settle, wouldn't rest. Her pacing became more frantic, her whines more insistent. Each time she returned to check her remaining puppies, her anxiety seemed to spike higher, as if she couldn't accept that one was missing. Greer felt sick to his stomach. He'd promised to protect them all, and he'd failed. The image of that tiny puppy, barely a week old, being carried away into the night haunted him. Would she survive without her mother's warmth? Without the special care she needed at this delicate age? "We'll need to document your injuries," one of the officers said, noting the way Greer winced when he moved. "I'm fine," he replied automatically, though his body screamed otherwise. "Just find them. That puppy won't survive long without proper care." The officer's expression was sympathetic but not especially hopeful. "We'll do what we can, but without concrete evidence linking this to any specific person." Greer knew what that meant. They wouldn't pursue it hard enough, wouldn't dig deep enough. Royce Madden's influence ran too deep in local law enforcement. Dawn was approaching by the time the police left. Greer sat on his workbench, holding an ice pack to his ribs, watching Hera's endless circuit, from puppies to door to driveway, and back again. Her motherly instincts were in overdrive, torn between protecting the four she still had and searching for the one that was taken. The violence of the night had changed everything. This wasn't just about paperwork and legal ownership anymore. Royce had shown how far he was willing to go, how little he cared about the animals he claimed as property. The stolen puppy was just the beginning, a warning of what could happen to the others if Greer didn't back down. But as he watched Hera's desperate vigil, saw the pain and confusion in her intelligent eyes, Greer felt his resolve harden. Royce had chosen violence, thinking it would break them. Instead, it had only proved how much these animals needed someone to stand up for them, someone who saw them as more than just breeding stock or property to be stolen. The remaining puppies began to stir, their tiny voices calling for breakfast. Hera immediately returned to them, checking each one with tender care before lying down to let them nurse. But her eyes never left the broken door, and every few minutes, her head would lift at some small sound, hoping against hope to hear the return of her stolen baby. The first rays of morning sunlight crept through the garage windows as Mariella Kovac knelt beside Hera, her weathered hands trembling slightly as they moved over the German Shepherd's coat. The exhausted mother dog lay still, allowing the familiar touch while keeping her remaining puppies close. "Here," Mariella whispered, her finger tracing a jagged line along Hera's left flank. "This scar, she got it during a building collapse rescue in Oklahoma. A piece of metal caught her, but she wouldn't stop searching until we found the trapped child." Her voice cracked with emotion. "And this one, on her shoulder, barbed wire, from a wilderness search in the mountains." Tamsin crouched nearby, camera in hand, methodically photographing each distinctive mark as Mariella identified them. The veterinarian's usually stern expression had softened with a mix of anger and determination. "Every scar tells a story," she said, adjusting the lens for a closer shot. "And every story proves who she really is." Greer watched from his perch on the workbench, still holding the ice pack to his ribs. The night's violence had left him battered, but seeing these two women documenting Hera's true identity filled him with a renewed sense of purpose. Each scar was another piece of evidence, another link in the chain that would expose Royce Madden's crimes. "She has a small notch in her right ear," Mariella continued, gently turning Hera's head. "Training accident, caught it on a fence during agility practice. And here." She pulled back the fur on Hera's chest, revealing a pale mark shaped like a crescent moon. This was from her very first rescue. She wouldn't give up, even when the rubble cut her. Saved 3 lives that day. Tamsin's camera clicked steadily, capturing every detail. "I'm documenting everything," she assured them. "Physical marks, locations, dates of the incidents. Combined with her microchip history and your training records, it builds an ironclad case of identity." Hera whimpered softly, her eyes darting to the garage door for the 100th time since her puppy had been taken. The sound made Greer's chest tighten with guilt and anger. He'd been turning the night's events over in his mind, and suddenly the pieces clicked into place. "The puppy," he said, straightening despite his protesting muscles. "Royce didn't take her just to hurt us. He took her because he knows Hera won't abandon her baby." The realization hit him like a physical blow. It's leverage. He's counting on Hera's maternal instincts to force her back to Stonegate. Mariella's hand stilled on Hera's coat. "Of course," she breathed. "A nursing mother will do anything to get back to her puppy. He's using the strongest instinct she has against her. And it's not just about getting Hera back," Tamsin added, lowering her camera. "A nursing mother is valuable to a breeding operation. The puppy is insurance. Either Hera returns to nurse it, or..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. They all knew what happened to puppies that young without proper care. Hera sensed their distress. She lifted her head, looking between them with those intelligent amber eyes that had once searched through rubble for survivors. Even now, exhausted and grieving, she radiated a quiet strength. "We're going to document everything," Tamsin said firmly, raising her camera again. "Every scar, every mark that proves she's your FEMA dog, Mariella. Every sign of the trauma she's endured at Stonegate. We'll build a case so solid that even Royce's pet deputies can't ignore it." Greer pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the pain. "Documentation isn't enough anymore," he said quietly. "That puppy won't survive long enough for legal channels to work. We need to find her." Mariella's eyes met his, and he saw his own determination reflected there. "Hera was trained to find people in the worst conditions imaginable," she said, "with her skills and the right opportunity." "No," Tamsin interrupted sharply. "You can't be thinking of breaking into Stonegate. That's suicide. Royce has security, guard dogs, and we have something he doesn't expect," Greer replied, moving to kneel beside Hera. The German shepherd turned to him, her gaze steady and trusting. "We have a mother who won't give up on her puppy. We have a trained rescue dog who knows how to work in dangerous conditions. And we have people who see her as more than just property to be stolen and traded." The morning light grew stronger, illuminating the makeshift nest where 4 puppies slept, unaware of their missing sister. Hera checked them again, counting with gentle nose touches, before returning her attention to the humans around her. "She's not just any rescue dog," Mariella said softly, pride mixing with worry in her voice. "She saved dozens of lives, found people in collapsed buildings. Through rubble and darkness, she knows how to work quietly, how to indicate without barking. All those skills, they're still there, even after everything Stonegate did to her." Tamsin continued taking photos, but her movements were slower now, more thoughtful. "If you're really considering this," she said finally, "then we need to be smart about it. We need to know the layout, the security patterns. We need a plan that gives us the best chance of getting both Hera and her puppy out safely." Greer nodded, feeling the weight of the decision settling over him. This wasn't just about protecting animals anymore. It was about righting a wrong that had gone on far too long, about giving a hero back her dignity and her family. "First," he said, "we document everything, build our case, because when we get that puppy back, Royce will come at us with everything he has. We need to be ready." Mariella's hand found Hera's head, scratching behind her ears in that familiar way that made the dog's eyes half close with comfort. "When I lost her," she said quietly, "I thought it was forever. I searched for months, filed reports, begged for help, but no one would stand up to Stonegate." She looked at Greer with fierce gratitude. Until now, Hera's eyes opened fully, and she stood, moving to press against Greer's leg. Despite her exhaustion and worry, her posture was straight, ready. She might have been stolen, might have been forced into breeding, but the heart of a rescue dog still beat strong within her. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows through the garage windows. 4 tiny puppies snoozed in their nest, while their mother stood guard beside the unlikely team that had formed around her. A maintenance man who'd found his courage, a veterinarian who refused to look the other way, a trainer who'd never stopped searching. And at the center of it all, a dog who had spent her life saving others, now needing saving herself. But not just saving, justice. The return of her stolen puppy would be just the beginning. The evidence of her true identity, documented in photographs and testimony, would expose Stonegate's crimes for all to see. The weight of the challenge ahead pressed down on them all, but there was no turning back now. Royce had made his move, thinking the theft of a puppy would break them. Instead, it had only strengthened their resolve. The rescue wasn't just an option anymore. It was inevitable. As inevitable as a mother's love for her child, as unstoppable as a hero's drive to save lives. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Greer paced his small living room, his work boots leaving scuff marks on the worn carpet. The loss of one of Hera's puppies had kept him awake for 2 straight nights, the tiny creature's absence weighing heavily on his conscience. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows of his modest home. A knock at the door made Hera's ears perk up. She lifted her head from where she lay, watching over her remaining 4 puppies, letting out a low, cautious growl. Greer checked through the peephole, then opened the door to reveal a lean man in his late 30s wearing a plain brown work jacket, his neat beard framing a determined expression. Quill Navarro. The man introduced himself, extending a weathered hand. "Doctor, Cuellar called me about your situation with Stonegate." Greer shook his hand, noting the firm grip. "Come in. Though I should warn you, Hera's pretty protective right now." Quill stepped inside, immediately pulling out a small notebook and camera from his jacket pocket. His movements were measured, professional. "I've been investigating Stonegate for 3 years," he explained, his voice carrying the weight of long-held frustration. "Every time I get close to exposing their operation, their political connections shut me down." Hera watched the newcomer intently as he settled into a chair. Greer noticed how Quill deliberately avoided making direct eye contact with the German Shepherd, instead letting her decide whether to trust him. "Tell me everything," Quill said, pen poised over his notebook. "Leave nothing out." For the next hour, Greer recounted the entire story, finding Hera in the storm, the emergency clinic visit, Royce's threats, and finally, the night raiders who stole one of the puppies. As he spoke, rain began falling outside, drumming against the roof. "Classic Royce Madden tactics," Quill muttered, jotting notes. "He's been running this scheme for years. Stealing trained dogs, forcing them to breed, selling the puppies for premium prices because of their bloodlines." He looked up at Greer. But this time, he made a mistake. He took Hera, a FEMA, certified search and rescue dog with documented ownership history, and now we have proof. Greer leaned forward. "So what's our next move?" Quill's eyes lit up with quiet determination. "We go on offense. No more waiting for them to strike." He pulled out a county map from his bag, spreading it across Greer's coffee table. "Stonegate's main facility is here." He pointed to a spot marked with a red circle. "But I've tracked suspicious activity at this secondary location." His finger moved to an abandoned farm, property 10 miles away. "You think that's where they're keeping the stolen pup?" Greer asked, studying the map. "It fits their pattern. They never keep stolen animals at the main facility. Too risky. But this place," Quill traced the access road with his pen. "It's isolated, hard to spot from the main road. Perfect for hiding their illegal operation." Hera padded over to the table, her nose twitching as she examined the map. Her amber eyes fixed on the spot Quill had indicated, and she let out a soft whine. "She knows something," Greer said quietly. "That place means something to her." Quill nodded slowly. "She might have been held there herself. These dogs, they remember." They spent the next 2 hours planning their approach. Quill had detailed satellite images of the property, showing blind spots in security and possible entry points. His methodical nature balanced Greer's growing urgency to act. "We'll need evidence," Quill explained, checking his camera equipment. "Photos, videos, documentation of conditions. Everything has to be legally obtained, no breaking and entering. We have to be smarter than them." Thunder crashed closer now, and Hera moved back to her puppies, nosing them closer together. Watching her, Greer felt a surge of protective determination. "When do we move?" "Tonight," Quill decided, checking his weather app. "The storm will provide cover, but we need backup." He made a call, speaking in low tones about coordinates and timing. Within an hour, Mariella arrived, her face set with quiet resolve. Dr. Tamsin Cuellar followed shortly after, carrying medical supplies in her veterinary bag. The small living room felt charged with purpose as they gathered around the map. "Mariella, you'll be our eyes on the main road." Quill assigned roles with practiced efficiency. "Watch for any movement from Stonegate's people." Dr. Cuellar, Stand by with your mobile clinic in case we find more animals in need of care. Greer and I will approach on foot with Hera. Are you sure about taking Hera? Tamsin asked, concern evident in her voice. She's still nursing. We need her, Quill replied firmly. She knows the place, and more importantly, she'll be able to track her missing puppy's scent. Greer knelt beside Hera, meeting her intelligent gaze. What do you think, girl? Ready to help us shut them down? The German shepherd's ears pricked forward, and she stood, her posture alert and ready. Despite her exhaustion from nursing, there was no mistaking the determination in her stance. They gathered their equipment, top flashlights with red filters to maintain night vision, two-way radios, Quill's cameras, and emergency medical supplies. Tamsin helped them secure the remaining puppies in a warm, safe space where they could be monitored. As they made final preparations, the storm intensified. Rain lashed against the windows, and lightning split the sky. But instead of deterring them, the weather seemed to fuel their resolve. Remember, Quill addressed the group one final time, his voice steady despite the thunder. Our primary goal is documentation and rescue. No confrontations unless absolutely necessary. We're building a case that will stick this time. Greer checked his phone one last time, making sure the emergency numbers were ready to dial. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. For years, he'd been the quiet maintenance man, the one people overlooked. But now, standing with these allies, with Hera at his side, he felt something new, stirring in his chest, the courage to fight back. The wind howled as they stepped out into the storm, their vehicles positioned strategically for quick access. Hera moved purposefully between Greer and Quill, her nose already working the wind, seeking any trace of her stolen pup. Ready? Quill asked, checking his equipment one final time. Greer nodded, patting Hera's head. Ready. The word came out stronger than he expected, carrying the weight of commitment and determination. They moved out into the stormy night, no longer reactive victims but a coordinated team with a clear mission. The time for defense was over. Now, they would bring the fight to Stonegate's door, armed with truth and justice as their weapons. Lightning flashed again, illuminating their determined faces as they set out toward the abandoned farm. The storm seemed to mirror their own gathering strength, a force of nature ready to break upon those who had too long operated in shadows. Behind them, Tamsin and Mariella took their positions, all connected by radio, all committed to exposing Stonegate's cruel operation. The chess pieces were in place, the game had changed, and somewhere in the darkness ahead, a lonely puppy waited for rescue, unaware that help was finally on the way. The old fruit-packing barn loomed against the darkening sky, its weathered boards creaking in the wind. Greer's heart pounded as he, Tamsin, and Quill crept toward the rusty side door, guided by Hera's determined path. The German shepherd's nose worked the air, her muscles tense with purpose. Look there, Tamsin whispered, pointing to a faint orange glow through the grimy windows. Heat lamps. The door hinges protested as they eased it open. The smell hit them first, the unmistakable scent of too many animals kept in too small a space. Stacked wooden crates lined the walls, reaching toward the rafters. The orange glow came from heat lamps strung on extension cords, casting eerie shadows across the dusty floor. Whimpers and quiet yips echoed in the cavernous space. Greer's hands shook as he peered into the nearest crate. Puppies, so many puppies, their eyes bright with fear. This is bigger than we thought, Quill muttered, documenting everything with his phone camera. Must be at least 30 dogs in here. Hera suddenly tensed, her ears forward. She darted between the crates with purpose, leading them deeper into the barn. There, in a crate near the back wall, they found what they were looking for. The stolen puppy from Hera's litter, crying weakly under a heat lamp. Thank God, Tamsin breathed, reaching for the latch. Let's get them all out of here. A door slammed. Heavy footsteps echoed on wooden planks. Well, Royce Madden's voice cut through the dim air like a knife. Breaking and entering now, are we? 3 men flanked him, their faces hard in the orange light. One cracked his knuckles, another held a length of pipe. This ends tonight, Madden, Greer said, his voice steadier than he felt. We've got proof of everything. The stolen dogs, the illegal breeding operation, all of it. Proof? Royce laughed, the sound hollow in the vast space. You've got nothing but trespassing charges coming your way. Boys, show them out. Roughly, The first punch caught Greer in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. He stumbled back against the crates as chaos erupted. Quill grappled with one of Royce's men while Tamsin tried to reach the puppy crates. Hera snarled, placing herself between the attackers and her found pup. In the struggle, someone knocked into one of the heat lamp stands. It toppled, the hot bulb shattering against a pile of dry straw. Flames leaped up instantly, hungry for the ancient wood and years of dust. "Fire!" Tamsin shouted. Smoke began filling the upper reaches of the barn. Royce and his men backed away from the spreading flames, cursing. "Save the valuable ones," Royce ordered, pointing at specific crates before fleeing toward the exit. High-pitched squeals of terror rose from the crates as smoke thickened. Hera barked once, then disappeared into the growing inferno, following the sounds of frightened puppies. "Hera," Greer called after her, but the smoke stung his eyes and throat. He dropped to his hands and knees where the air was clearer. "Get the crates," Tamsin yelled, already dragging one toward the door. "Quick!" Greer crawled forward, shoving crate after crate toward where he could hear Tamsin's voice directing him. The heat grew intense, wood popping and cracking overhead. His lungs burned with every breath. A thunderous crack split the air. Greer looked up to see a massive ceiling beam, eaten through by flames, plummeting toward him. He tried to roll away, but not fast enough. White-hot pain exploded through his leg as the beam pinned him to the floor. Smoke swirled around him, thick and choking. The heat pressed closer, flames dancing at the edges of his vision. He pulled desperately at his trapped leg, but the beam wouldn't budge. "Help!" He tried to shout, but only managed a hoarse whisper. The fire roared, drowning out all other sounds. This was it, he thought. This was how he would die. Through the smoke and flames came a familiar shape. Hera, her fur singed and nose blistered, emerged like a ghost. She limped to his side, whining softly. "Go," Greer croaked. "Save yourself." But Hera had other ideas. She wedged her body under the edge of the beam, pressing her back against it. Despite her burns, despite her exhaustion, she braced herself, muscles trembling with effort. Understanding flooded through Greer. He grabbed the beam and pushed with everything he had left. Hera's strength combined with his own, and slowly, agonizingly slowly, the beam shifted. The moment he felt pressure ease on his leg, Greer rolled free. Hera collapsed beside him, panting heavily. He wrapped his arms around her neck, burying his face in her smoky fur. "Come on." Tamsin's voice cut through the roar of flames. She appeared through the smoke, pulling them both toward cleaner air. They stumbled together toward the exit, Greer's injured leg threatening to buckle with each step. Behind them, the barn had become an inferno, flames shooting through the roof into the night sky. Outside, they collapsed onto damp grass. Greer's lungs heaved as he gulped fresh air. Around them, rescued puppies whimpered in their crates, while sirens wailed in the distance. Hera pressed against his side, her breathing labored but steady. Despite her burns and the terror she'd just faced, her eyes remained alert, watching over the saved puppies. Even now, she was ready to protect them. Tamsin knelt beside them, her face streaked with soot. "Don't move," she ordered, examining Greer's leg. "Possible fracture. Definitely some burns. You'll need the hospital." "The puppies?" Greer asked hoarsely. "Safe. We got most of them out, including yours." Tamsin's voice cracked. "Quill's already called in backup. Royce won't escape this time, not with all the evidence we've gathered." Greer reached out to stroke Hera's singed fur, feeling the strong heart beating beneath. "You saved my life," he whispered to her. She turned her head to look at him, those intelligent amber eyes saying more than words ever could. Police cars and fire trucks began arriving, their lights painting the scene in red and blue. Through the chaos of emergency responders and the roar of fire hoses, Greer kept his hand on Hera's back, grateful for every breath they both still took. The night that had started with a desperate rescue had become something more, proof of the unbreakable bond between humans and dogs, of courage in the face of danger, and of the extraordinary lengths one ordinary man and one extraordinary dog would go to protect the innocent. The storm intensified as emergency vehicles converged on the burning barn. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the chaos below in harsh bursts. Sirens wailed through the darkness, their sound mixing with the rumble of thunder and the roar of flames. Quill Navarro emerged from his vehicle, rain streaming down his face, as he coordinated with the newly arrived deputies, ones he trusted, from outside the county. They moved with purpose, their flashlight beams cutting through the downpour. Royce's truck just left heading east, someone shouted over the storm. Through the pelting rain, they could see distant taillights weaving erratically down the muddy access road. Quill and 3 deputies jumped into their vehicles, sirens blaring as they gave chase. Greer watched from the back of an ambulance where paramedics were treating his leg. Hera sat pressed against him, refusing to leave his side despite her own injuries. Tamsin worked nearby, helping emergency responders check the rescued puppies. The chase didn't last long. Within minutes, radio chatter confirmed what the lightning flashes had revealed. Royce's expensive truck had slid off the rain-slicked road and into a drainage ditch. The deputies converged, weapons drawn. "On your knees, hands where we can see them," their commands carried faintly through the storm. Royce emerged from his crashed vehicle, his pressed polo shirt now mud-stained, his usual arrogance replaced by desperation. He raised his hands slowly as deputies moved in to cuff him. Back at the burning barn, firefighters battled the blaze while animal control officers documented everything. Quill's team photographed each crate, each piece of equipment, building the case that would bring Stonegate down. "We found records in his office," one investigator reported, holding up waterproof evidence bags. "Breeding logs, sale documents, forged papers, everything we need." Greer felt a weight lift from his shoulders. After all the fear, all the fighting, justice was finally catching up to Royce Madden. He looked down at Hera, who gazed back with those intelligent amber eyes. "It's over, girl," he whispered, scratching behind her ears. "You're free." As dawn approached, the rain began to ease. The barn was a smoldering ruin, but the evidence had been secured. Mariella arrived on scene, her face tight with worry, until she spotted Hera. "Oh, thank God," she breathed, hurrying over. "When I heard about the fire." Hera's tail wagged at the sight of her former owner, but she didn't move from Greer's side. Instead, she pressed herself more firmly against his leg, just as she had that first, stormy night when she'd sought his help. Mariella's eyes filled with tears as she watched. "She's chosen," she said softly. "I'm sorry," Greer started to say, but Mariella shook her head. "Don't be. She knows who fought for her, who risked everything to save her and her puppies." She smiled through her tears. "And she's right." Tamsin approached, holding a clipboard. "The puppies are all stable. Animal control has documented everything. They're building a rock-solid case against Stonegate." "What happens now?" Greer asked. Mariella straightened, wiping her eyes. "I have an idea, actually. I still work with the disaster relief organization. We're always looking for new search and rescue teams." She looked meaningfully at Greer and Hera. "With proper training, you two could do amazing things together." "Me?" Greer blinked in surprise. "But I'm just a maintenance guy." "No," Tamsin said firmly. "You're the man who stood up to corruption, who risked his life to save innocent animals. You're a hero, Greer Landon, whether you see it or not." Hera nudged his hand with her nose, as if agreeing. Greer felt emotion well up in his throat as he looked at this dog who had changed his life, who had seen something in him that first night that he hadn't even seen in himself. "Shared custody," Mariella suggested. "Hera can train with both of us. We'll work together, help other people, save lives. What do you think?" Before Greer could respond, Tamsin cleared her throat. "Speaking of working together." She fidgeted with her clipboard, suddenly shy. "Would you maybe like to get dinner sometime? Once you're healed up, I mean." Greer felt warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with his injuries. He looked at Tamsin, really looked at her, seeing the strength and compassion that had been there all along. "I'd like that," he said softly. As the sun finally broke through the clouds, Greer marveled at how much had changed. The overlooked maintenance man had found his calling. The stolen search and rescue dog had found her way home. Not to her past, but to a new future. And in standing up for what was right, Greer had found not only purpose but connection. Hera's head rested on his knee, her eyes half closed in contentment. Around them, evidence was being catalogued, statements taken, charges filed. Stonegate's dark empire was crumbling, and from its ashes, something beautiful was emerging, a future built on loyalty, courage, and love. The morning light caught Hera's fur, turning it to gold. She was no longer the desperate mother he'd met in the storm, and he was no longer the lonely man who'd followed her. They had forged something stronger than steel in the crucible of those dangerous days, a bond that would carry them forward into whatever challenges lay ahead. Tamsin sat down beside him on the ambulance's tailgate, their shoulders touching. Mariella began explaining the training program, her eyes bright with possibility, and Hera, secure in her choice, pressed herself against Greer's boot just as she had that first night, no longer pleading for help, but offering her strength, her loyalty, her love. The transformation was complete. The overlooked man had become a rescuer. The stolen dog had found her true home, and in saving each other, they had built something that would last, a partnership founded on trust, sealed in fire, and destined to help others just as they had helped each other. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.